We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
You're listening to DNA ID, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, Scene of the Crime, Zodiac Speaking, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, Citizen Detective, and Campus Killings. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
On July 29, 2002, a woman whose name has not been publicly released called the Yavapai County, Arizona Sheriff's Office. She told the investigators that she found something in a rock collection her 8-year-old son maintained that wasn't a rock at all. The boy was an avid rock collector and had inherited a collection from his grandfather, along with his grandfather's enthusiasm for geological specimens. The mother didn't usually pay attention to any of it, any more than I would have if my kids brought a rock inside and said, "Look, Mom, a rock." But when she did take a look, she saw that this item in the rock collection wasn't a rock. The rock was immediately recognizable as a segment of human jawbone with a molar in place. The place where the bone had been found could not be specifically recalled, but it might have been in the San Carlos Reservoir area in Arizona. The little rock collection owner also didn't remember when the bone was found or whether he had even been the one to find it, or perhaps his grandfather did. The sheriff's office and the Yavapai County Medical Examiner's Office started working to figure out where this bone had come from. I don't know whether they suspected the bone's origin was some kind of Native American burial ground, since the area of the San Carlos Reservoir is located in the San Carlos Apache Indian Reservation, but that proved not to be the case. The jawbone was sent to the Center for Human Identification at the University of North Texas, where DNA was extracted from the tooth. The DNA indicated that the jawbone was from a Caucasian male. An STR profile from the tooth was entered into the CODIS Unidentified Human Remains database, but there weren't any matches to any other remains or any family members. This was because, it would turn out, no one was looking for the person to whom the jawbone belonged. The jawbone and its elusive owner became known to the Yavapai County authorities as Rock Collection John Doe, and he sat on a shelf in the evidence room for more than 20 years. By the time 2023 rolled around, the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, which I'll call YCSO going forward, had entered into a partnership with the Ramapo College Investigative Genealogy Center in New Jersey. The administrators of the program were looking for cases for their students to work on, and the YCSO Criminal Investigations Bureau thought of Rock Collection John Doe. They still had in their possession the extract from the jawbone taken by the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. In May of 2023, the University of North Texas submitted the extract from the tooth in the jawbone to nonprofit lab Intermountain Forensics in Salt Lake City, Utah. Intermountain Forensics conducted whole genome sequencing and bioinformatics and obtained a SNP profile from the extract. Then the profile was submitted to the budding genealogy students at Ramapo's IGG Center. The Rock Collection John Doe case was one of several considered by the students in a week-long, hands-on learning boot camp that took place in July of 2023. The SNP profile from the jawbone extract was entered into GEDmatch Pro and Family Tree DNA, the databases available for this type of genealogy analysis. David Gurney, director of the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center, told the New York Times it was a team effort. Professor Gurney, the students, and a 15-year-old high school intern named Ethan Schwartz worked together on the case, using it as a teaching tool, and were able to parse through the genealogy relatively quickly. There were about 7 DNA relatives of Rock Collection John Doe in the open-source databases. That's not very many, but the closest DNA relative was a young adult female who shared a whopping 2,221 centimorgans with Rock Collection John Doe. This was a great start. This level of shared DNA meant that Rock Collection John Doe was a grandson, grandfather, uncle, half or full brother, or nephew to the top match. The Ramapo group filled out this top match's family tree knowing that Rock Collection John Doe was a fairly close relative. Then they began the process of elimination. Based on the age of the top match, they ruled out that Rock Collection John Doe could be her grandchild. She was too young in 2002, when Rock Collection John Doe's jawbone was found in the rock collection, to have been a grandson who was an adult male. There was another helpful piece of information that the Ramapo group had. The female top match shared no X DNA with Rock Collection John Doe. Remember that biological males inherit their X chromosome only from their mothers, and pass the X chromosome only to their daughters. Women pass X DNA down to all their children. This allowed the Ramapo team to use X inheritance patterns to rule out some of the potential relationships. For example, because of the lack of shared X DNA, they knew Rock Collection John Doe wasn't the top match's brother or her paternal uncle. This was because the top match got half her X chromosome from her father, who inherited his in full from his mother, and her paternal uncle would have also had this same X chromosome. The other half of the top match's X chromosome was inherited from her mother, who would have passed it on to any sons. Rock Collection John Doe didn't have any shared segments of that X chromosome, so he could not be either her brother or an uncle on her father's side. The Ramapo group turned to analysis of the other lower-level DNA matches of Rock Collection John Doe they found in the databases. Match number 5 shared 194 centimorgans with Rock Collection John Doe, and match 5 and the top match shared common ancestors, great-grandparents Hurt Yager and Eva Jane Tyler, who married in the 1870s. This allowed the genealogy group to rule out that Rock Collection John Doe was a nephew to the top match, because a nephew would share less DNA with match 5 than Rock Collection John Doe did. 195 centimorgans meant that there was a closer kinship relationship between the two. The only possible remaining relationships that Rock Collection John Doe could share with the top match were a grandparent or possibly a half-sibling. Building out the connections between additional low-level matches, which shared between 79 and 92 centimorgans with Rock Collection John Doe, they located another most recent common ancestor couple. This was William Park Stout, who married Anne Olmsted in the first decade of the 19th century. Another couple united descendants from both sets of most recent common ancestors, Vera Lucille Stout, who married Thomas Everett Yager. These, it would turn out, were Rock Collection John Doe's parents. In order to confirm the hypothesis that Rock Collection John Doe was the top match's grandfather, they had to rule out the final possibility, that of a half-sibling. They turned to segment analysis, which indicated that matches 2 and 5 shared no DNA on a specific overlapping chromosome, meaning they did not come from the same side of the Doe's family tree. Rock Collection John Doe wasn't a half-sibling of the top match. He had to be match number 1's paternal grandfather. The boot camp members started the genealogy work on July 24th, and by the end of the day, they had the name of a candidate who they felt was likely Rock Collection John Doe. But it seemed wrong, because the top match's paternal grandfather, the candidate the genealogy was pointing to, wasn't missing. Match number 1's paternal grandfather had a documented date of death. Not only that, his premature demise was covered very publicly in the press. He'd been given a funeral with full military honors, and he'd been buried in a marked grave for decades. The Ramapo group doubled down, rechecking everything to be sure of their conclusion. Using the shared centimorgan tool on DNA Painter, they confirmed the interrelationships between all the matches and the subject, verifying their positions in the family tree and relationships to the common ancestors, and that the shared centimorgans supported those relationships. They also re-examined both the Y-DNA and mitochondrial DNA haplogroups to make sure they made sense with the subject's family tree. They reached the same conclusion. The DNA was clear. Rock Collection John Doe was the paternal grandfather to the top match. The Ramapo team made their report to the Yavapai County Medical Examiner, explaining their findings and why they believed Rock Collection John Doe was the top match's paternal grandfather. The medical examiner contacted the family and learned that indeed, the candidate was not missing. He was buried in Palmyra, Missouri. I don't know exactly how the interactions with the family went. I imagine the surviving family members were confused and skeptical. But they cooperated, and in August 2023, a voluntary buccal swab was given by suspected Rock Collection John Doe's only surviving child, an adult daughter named Teresa Lewis. In March 2024, Virginia-based Bodie Technologies testing results confirmed a direct parent-child relationship between Teresa and Rock Collection John Doe. The jawbone came from her father, Captain Everett Leland Yager. And the top match, the DNA relative who shared over 2,000 centimorgans with Rock Collection John Doe, was his granddaughter Gretchen Maris. Her father, Richard Leland Yager, had been the only son and firstborn child of Everett Leland Yager. So who is Everett Leland Yager? He was born on October 2, 1920 in Marion County, Missouri, to parents Thomas Everett Yager and Vera Lucille Stout Yager. He grew up in Palmyra and graduated from Palmyra High School in 1938 as president of the student body and with varsity letters in football and basketball. He was also a Boy Scout and a cub reporter for the local paper. After graduation, he went to work for a local businessman named Lynn Hutcherson, who owned some local service stations. Captain Yager, a title he earned in 1950, started at the local Phillips 66 station at Ross and Maine, and then became manager of the Louisiana-Missouri station Hutcherson owned. Yager enlisted in the Navy Air Corps in August 1942 as an air cadet, signing up to serve his country, which was gearing up for military involvement in World War II. Captain Yager went through rigorous training, first taking flying and piloting lessons at St. Ambrose College in Davenport, Iowa. Then he was sent to Athens, Georgia for pre-flight school. There was a blurb in the Palmyra Spectator about the program young Leland had enrolled in. It says, quote, "Intent on producing the finest, toughest, smartest flyers in the world, the Navy is devoting 12 weeks of its 12-month training program to the job of converting average young Americans into splendid physical specimens. At the pre-flight school, the Naval Aviation Cadet goes through a daily routine of strenuous sports and exercises, planned to develop teamwork, split-second timing, muscular coordination, and the indomitable will to win," end quote. I'm sorry, I can't help it. I'm totally picturing the beach volleyball scene in Top Gun. Anyway, after Captain Yager completed the rigorous training in Athens, it was on to another flight training center in Norman, Oklahoma, and then finally, in 1943, he graduated from the Naval Air Training Center in Corpus Christi, Texas, as a second lieutenant. But his training was far from over. He was then sent to Jacksonville, Florida for more training in dive bombing and pursuit flying, and learned to fly Corsair fighters. After that, it was on to Cherry Point Air Base in New Bern, North Carolina, and then to Walnut Ridge, Arkansas for training specific to taking off from and landing on aircraft carriers. Then he landed at Mojave Air Base in Mojave, California, and finally Santa Ana's El Toro Air Base, where he was assigned to the VMF 323 Squadron, nicknamed the Death Rattlers, to go overseas. He departed on January 18, 1945, after almost 3 years of preparation. Captain Yager's squadron was initially stationed on the island of Espiritu Santo off the Philippines, and then moved to the Tinian Air Base on Okinawa. He and his co-pilot successfully shot down a Japanese fighter. In one harrowing incident, he made a crash landing on Tinian Island after his plane was so badly damaged by enemy fire that it had no wheels or landing flaps. He was promoted to first lieutenant and then captain, although the latter rank was awarded post-World War II. Somehow, during all of this, Captain Yager found the time to get married, tying the knot with Helen Ruth DuBarry Yager on January 18, 1944, in Jacksonville. After the war in the fall of 1945, Captain Yager returned to Palmyra and purchased a partial ownership share of the Hutcherson service station where he'd been an employee. Eventually, he bought out his co-owner. He and his wife Ruth had 3 kids, one son Richard and 2 daughters, Teresa and Cynthia. He was very active in the community. According to a lengthy obituary in the Palmyra Spectator, he was a member of the American Legion and of the Veterans of Foreign Wars organizations as well as the Kiwanis Club. His daughter Teresa, who was only 4 when he was killed, recalled her father as very doting and involved, teaching her to ride a tricycle and buying her those golden books so many of us grew up with. In 1951, during the Korean War, Captain Yager was recalled to duty on July 2nd, some reports say July 6th, as a member of the Marine Corps Reserve. He reported to the El Toro Marine Air Station in Santa Ana, California for refresher training and found housing that would allow his family to join him there. Ruth was making plans to relocate the family imminently, but these things take time, and she and the kids were still in Missouri on Tuesday, July 31st, when Captain Yager and his second lieutenant Robert Phillips went up on a routine training mission in a two-seater SNJ. When the radio went silent and the plane disappeared from radar around 1:25 p.m., reconnaissance planes were sent up to scout the area between Lake Elsinore and Mount Palomar for any signs of the missing plane and pilots. That same day, a Corsair fighter being flown by Naval Lieutenant John Harper crashed near Valley Center. It was a horrific scene, with the plane bursting into flames, the Corsair completely destroyed, and the captain's body mangled and incinerated. After hearing of this crash, the recon planes flying over the area observed a wreckage site in the mountains 6 miles southwest of Lake Elsinore in Riverside County, California. That Wednesday, El Toro Marine Air Base press dispatches said it was believed possible that Captain Yager's plane had collided with Lieutenant Harper's Corsair, causing both planes to plummet to the ground. But witnesses at the scene of the first crash saw the plane fall from the sky all by itself with no other aircraft in sight. It turned out that it was just an incredibly tragic stroke of bad luck that both planes crashed with fatalities on the same day. Helicopter teams were dispatched to Captain Yager's crash site, but there were no survivors. The rescue team had to carry the bodies a half-mile to where waiting choppers had landed to transport the victims to the base. According to the Hannibal Courier-Post, the bodies of 30-year-old Captain Yager and Lieutenant Phillips were identified by personnel at the Marine Air Base at El Toro. The Marines had notified Captain Yager's wife, Ruth, that he was missing, and she and his father, Everett, left Palmyra to travel to California. But when they arrived in Kansas City, bad news was awaiting them there. The plane and the pilots' bodies had been located. Devastated, Ruth and Everett returned to Palmyra and made arrangements for their beloved husband and son to be returned to his hometown for burial. His flag-draped coffin was accompanied back to Palmyra by First Lieutenant Glenn Knox and was met by an honor guard from Boots Dixon Post 174 of the American Legion, where Captain Yager held a leadership position. The guard escorted his body to the Lewis Brothers funeral home. His funeral, with full military honors, was held on August 7th at the Methodist Church, and Captain Yager was buried in the Greenwood Cemetery. His children were just 6, 4, and 7 months old. They were raised by their paternal grandparents, Captain Yager's parents, Everett and Vera Stout Yager. Okay, so that's the story of Captain Leland Yager, a war hero and father of 3 who was killed in a tragic aerial training incident. There are quite a few unanswered questions about the crash that killed Captain Yager. UPI reported at the time that the pilots had been practicing aerial acrobatics in rugged mountain terrain when they crashed. No mention was made of bad weather or other factors. I do know that there was no explosion in the air. The plane crashed from mechanical failure. This from an article in the Courier-Post, quote, Gretchen Maris of St. Louis, whose DNA was initially matched to that of her grandfather, served active duty Air Force for 8 years and has read documents surrounding Captain Yager's fatal plane crash. She explained, quote, in his military record, there are several statements from outlying farmers from around the crash site. They saw the plane but didn't hear the crash. No explanation as to why. It was a training accident he was killed in. It was aerobatic training. One of its instructors was supposed to be a co-pilot. But at the last minute, there was a substitution. They don't know a whole lot about what happened. I wasn't able to find any articles about the level of destruction of the aircraft or the condition of the bodies, whether they were still inside the cockpit or had been ejected. Contemporary documents indicate that Captain Yager's remains were retrieved from the crash site and he was returned to Missouri and given a military burial. But now we know that not all of him was buried in the grave. A piece of him was found somewhere else. There was no autopsy on Captain Yager, so we have no documentation or autopsy report to refer to. The funeral director of the funeral home the captain's remains had been sent to reported that the funeral home retained no records of the state of the body and no employees who had worked there at the time were still employed by the facility. I spoke with a detective sergeant who manages the Criminal Investigations Bureau and Cold Case Unit for the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, and he told me that his agency contacted the military to try to find out some information about the condition of Captain Yager's remains. The military reported that they had recovered most of Captain Yager, so it's clear that they knew that they had recovered only partial remains, and no doubt military officials informed the family of that. A nephew of Captain Yager who attended his funeral recalled a closed casket. We will likely never know exactly what happened with the crash and Captain Yager. The adult members of the Yager family who were alive at the time have passed away. But there's another, even more puzzling mystery that has everyone who worked on this case stymied. Yavapai County officials admitted that they have no idea how Captain Yager's jawbone, presumably dislodged by a crash in California, came to be collected by a child hundreds of miles away in Arizona. The family of the boy whose rock collection the jawbone was found in has no connections to California at all. There are a couple of options. As pointed out by some people who have looked at this case, the jawbone could have been transported to Arizona by a waterway flowing to that area. I'm not good with maps, and I certainly don't understand hydrology one bit, but it doesn't look to me as though any waterways flow from Lake Elsinore to the San Carlos Reservoir. And we don't even know for sure that that's where the jawbone was found. Another theory is that if Captain Yager's jawbone was left lying out there in the mountains, a scavenger bird could have snapped up the bone and flown it to Arizona. A vulture, for example, an Andean condor, even a bald eagle might have grabbed the bone up. I know, it seems incredibly unlikely. But Google knows all and told me that several species of birds are known for their ability to travel several hundred miles in one flight. I'm not a bird person, but I also can't think of any more plausible way that the jawbone's migration to a whole other state could have come about. If any of you can, by all means let me know. For now, we've agreed to chalk it up to alien activity. As for our young genealogists at Ramapo who study under David Gurney and Karen Binder, director and assistant director of the center, they did the terrific work, in this case pro bono. The intern, Ethan, is a sophomore at Suffern High School, and his family has a military background, with both his father and grandfather serving their country. It is fitting that this case involved a military man. Ethan is reportedly the youngest person to ever contribute to an investigative genetic genealogy case resolution. And, of course, Captain Yager's granddaughter, who entered her DNA into searchable databases and opted in, and whose DNA profile was instrumental in identifying her grandfather's remains, has also extensively served her country. Thank you for your service. Recently, I let listeners know about a new benefit available to them called an AbJack Insider subscription that's available through Apple Podcasts. An AbJack Insider subscription will give listeners ad-free access to every bit of DNA ID content published, both past episodes and future episodes. It will also give you benefits like early access and bonus content. Head over to Apple Podcasts and click on the DNA ID show page or the AbJack Entertainment channel to start a free trial. Thanks for listening to this episode of DNA ID. If you'd like to listen to the show ad-free and help support the show in the process, please head over to patreon.com/DNAID. And if you're interested in some fun DNA ID merch, visit the store at customizedgirl.com/s/DNAID podcast. To contact the show, please email us at dnaidpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on social media at DNAID Podcast on Instagram, at DNAID Podcast on Twitter, or on Facebook at facebook.com/DNAID Podcast. Finally, if you want to visit our website, go to DNAIDpodcast.com. You'll be able to get all the episodes of the show, leave comments on episodes that I can respond to, and you can even leave voicemails. You'll get all the latest news about the show and important updates. Find links to our social media, merch, and a lot more. It's really your one-stop shop for everything DNA ID. DNA ID is written, researched, and hosted by me, Jessica Betancourt. It's produced by me and Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Music by Connor Betancourt. Check out our other collaborative podcasts, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons, and Beyond Bizarre True Crime.